Good afternoon and welcome to our penultimate toolkit session. And I'm going to put that micro-credentials form back up for you while Robin tells us why we're here and what we're doing. Well, I think you already know this. He's going to keep it short. It's all good.
Super quick, super quick. Hi, everybody. Welcome, Robert. I just want to say again, a thanks to Aspect for allowing us to put on these sessions. So we've been running these for a couple of years now. I think they're always interesting and well attended. And so Aspect is a consortium. I think we're up to about 40 universities right now at the moment, all interested in the kind of arts, humanities, social sciences, and how we get research out of the university into the world, particular lens on commercialization, but that really means sustainability rather than anything else. And this, particular session is great because we think about impact and right the way through from the time we're doing research, but also when we look at the types of like later stage, how we sustain stuff, the business models are usually quite diverse and require a separation between who's benefiting and also who's able to fund it. So as a result of that, we have to understand and have to be able to measure impact. And so super important. Looking forward to this session. So I'll hand you back to Lucy.
Well, it was a couple of years ago. AI wasn't really a part of it. And as most of you know, because I'm lots of familiar faces in the chat and on the attendee list there, it's all been about AI in this session, the evolution, for better or worse. We're not going to, I think another key theme is AI has its use, it has its place, and that's something we've been exploring over these sessions too. It's not the perfect tool for absolutely everything. So any of that you might have missed, they're all on YouTube channel, which I will pop in the chat. And it's our final one on Tuesday around gamification and playable experiences. Again, different ways to get your message, your project, your impact, whatever it means, out there. It's all been about reach, hasn't it, Robin, and about the tools you can use to have different conversations with different people. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you back on Tuesday for the next one. But that's enough about the background. Robert, good to see you. Thank you for
Yeah,
joining
thank you
us.
so much, Lucy. Thanks, Robin, as well. And good to be with you all. I'm good to start sharing my screen, Lucy.
Yes, please.
All right, let's get going here. Let me just get this up. Let me know when this is coming through for you.
Perfect.
All right. If you're able, I would love for you to start by just either scanning this QR code or let me see. I think is that the URL that you put in the chat
No,
for?
that's for the micro credentials. So if you want to pop your
Okay.
URL in for this as well, just so we have different ways of doing it, that'd be
If you're
great. Oh,
joining
there we
from
go.
your phone, you can also click on the link and it should take you to WhatsApp. And I'll explain a little bit more why we're doing this, but you can follow the prompts and it will pre-populate with this code at the bottom that says SD5, as you see in the slide, and you can just hit send. And then once you send, it'll kick off a little series of questions. And let me get back to it.
Just a
And
little warm up
as
so that we know who's in the room, isn't it? It's just a different way of
yeah,
doing it. Yeah.
a little bit more about you all, a little bit more about your understanding of impact and use of AI. It's five brief questions and should take 2 to 3 minutes. So as you're getting settled, you can join and scan the QR code and follow those prompts. Um, and this will stay live for the duration of the time. So if you get started and we move on, feel free to keep filling it out. So we'll just give it a few minutes, and as we're doing that, I'll introduce myself. So it is so good to be with you all. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you today. My name is Robert Morris, and for those of you who weren't on at the beginning, I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm also nursing a little bit of a cold, so pardon my coughing and hacking up here every once in a while, but we're going to make it through. And I work for Simba Technologies, as well as work for an organization called Hope International. I'll explain the relationship a little later. But my background, I was born and raised in South Africa, and was my parents were missionaries through the church, and so I grew up in a rural area in South Africa, and was exposed to the harshness of poverty from a young age, and that just made me passionate about wanting to um, do my part to help transform lives however I can contribute. And so through those experiences, have ended up working in economic development for the last 11 years now, and through mostly engaging with microfinance and other grassroots financial services, alongside my work at Simba Technologies, which has been amazing to be able to leverage technology to be able to measure and demonstrate the impact of the work that we're doing. So, hopefully, this has been a little bit more time for you to get started on that. And as you know, our session today is on demonstrating that impact, evidence, and value. And I'm going to start by giving a prompt and would love to hear your responses to this question before we even get going. Why is this topic even matter? Why is it important to measure impact? So feel free to drop some thoughts in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes. This is just a primer to get the wheels turning this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're joining from.
And I've had a little bit of a challenge with WhatsApp, so my distracted faces, I'm making sure that I work too.
Okay, no problem. Oh, Sarah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, Peter Greer has been very influential in my life. So that's great. I'll mention your name. Oh, cool. Yeah, some connections there in East Africa. Yeah, a lot of our work is in East Africa with Hope. So, all right. Accountability, solve complex social challenges, give something back to society. Thanks. To gauge whether you're doing what you're doing has relevance beyond your own interest. To understand if ideas in the academy are relevant for society. I love that. That's a really good one. To show importance and relevance of your work. Yeah, thank you so much. It is important to ask this question because why don't we just keep kind of doing what we've been doing, which is measuring profit, right? The financial return is so clear, so evident on something. We have the for-profit, we have the not-for-profit, and it's really compelling to say, and easy and clear to say, well, we should just measure the financial return, and that will say whether we've been doing a good job or not. But what we found is that that does not lead to actual representation of what is happening because where there is financial gain, there might be societal loss. And so a lot of your points here are exactly some of the reasons that I believe that we should be measuring impact. It keeps focus on real change and not just activities that we're doing. And we'll talk about the difference between outputs, outcomes, and impact here shortly. It shows whether people's lives are actually improving, and whether or not the interventions or the programs that we're running are contributing towards real transformation. Working with good quality data, I should caveat all of this to say, why is it important to measure impact with good data? And I'll talk about that because I've experienced a lot of bad quality data, which can sometimes be even more harmful than having no data at all. And so having good data, it helps us identify what is working and what is not. It leads to better decisions and smarter strategies, strengthens accountability to communities and partners, and it builds credibility with funders and other stakeholders as well. And ultimately, teaches us over time how we can best steward the resources effectively in a meaningful way. And so, as we go throughout the time together today, I would love us to keep this ultimately in mind, whether we're implementing various types of AI in the fields that we're working in, whether we're still doing manual paper-based surveys, we're talking about people's lives that we're seeking to positively impact. And so ultimately, we want to be held accountable to doing that well and effectively and have a standard of excellence in our work. And so I'm just going to share briefly as a background and to lay the foundation for some of what I'll be sharing here. So Simba Technologies, we help support the impact measurement space through effective last mile data collection. And so through Simba, you can build your surveys through WhatsApp, which is what you just experienced by scanning the QR code or clicking the link. And then when you are able to collect the data, you're able to analyze it effectively in more real-time, faster methods than in the past, and be able to use it to improve your decision making or to demonstrate impact in your program. And so currently we're working in about 56 countries around the world, collecting tens of thousands of data points to be able to help organizations and institutions that are seeking to create positive social change be able to measure and demonstrate the impact that they are a part of. And so, as I was saying at the beginning, this all started out of a desire to combine the power of for-profit data capabilities within the nonprofit space. When I was at graduate school in the UK, I met the co-founder of Simba, April, who some of you may know. And April worked in the for-profit sector. She had been working at several tech startups and had amazing background and access to data. They trove all of the data around their customers, around potential customers. They're tracking all the mouse clicks. They're tracking all the various interactions individuals have with their platforms. And it was such rich and meaningful data for the company to be able to make informed decisions. But those were decisions that were primarily aimed towards the profit of the company, not necessarily towards the benefit of the customer or the consumer. And so that was in contrast to my experience where we had very little data. We wanted to do a lot of good for those that we were trying to serve, but we were kind of serving them blindly. We were operating with our eyes closed, saying like, well, we think this will be helpful. We'll go listen to as many people as we can, collect as many stories as we can. We've got to satisfy the funders, those who are helping us finance this work. And we've got to respond to the needs of those that we're serving in the communities. And we find ourselves in this wedged position where we have very little good quality data, but a strong social motivation. And so, as we were trying to diagnose and solve for this kind of conundrum, April and I were saying, well, like, why is this? Why is this the case? Why is data so hard to come by? In the nonprofit space. And so that's where we started dreaming a little bit about Simba. And so through this, one of the key areas that we landed on was the impact measurement space. And so there's lots of different types of data that you can collect, and not all of them are impact focused. So there's operational data that you need to optimize your processes and systems. There's financial data that you need to be able to measure. And those are all also incredibly useful and valuable data sources that nonprofits need. But one that we often talk about and focus on is the impact measurement and impact data space. And so I would also just petition that impact is something that is a little more ethereal. I would more focus on outcomes. So if this was a typical outcomes process, this is what it might look like. Impact measurement is a more broad umbrella term, but I think if you're looking at impact measurement, it's best to focus on your personal outcomes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But in a typical standard approach, you might see something like this. You design a survey based off of your program or your intervention. You input that into some sort of platform. It could that platform could be writing it out on a piece of paper, but you're translating those questions into something that you will use to collect your data. You hire and train individuals, and it might just be yourself. Um, but typically, if you're doing this at any type of scale, you would hire, or cross-culturally where you need translation, or you need someone who's more culturally appropriate to collect the data in a safe and a healthy way. You would hire someone and train them to collect that data. They would actually go out and collect it, and then you would synthesize and analyze the results, and you would share that report. And so, what, as you're looking at this, might be some challenges in this process? As you're just thinking logically and you're designing your survey for data collection, where might you run into some issues along the way? You can just drop those in the chat.
I've just put the micro credentials link in again, so sorry about that. People coming late. It's one of those things you suddenly realize it's midday, don't you?
So, as you're looking at this, where might you see some challenges?
I think Jimmy's
And
straight in
we'll,
with designing the right questions, because the
yep,
data you collect is only as good as the questions you ask, and the nuances of the language. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can share a quick example of that, Jimmy, because that is a great point. One of the surveys that I was involved in several years ago asked was seeking to, it was called a dream catcher survey. And the survey was designed to understand the dreams of those individuals for the future. What are the hopes for your children and for your family and for those in your community and for yourself? And the way that it was translated was basically, what did you dream about last night? And so when we got the data back, it was all about like I didn't have any dreams last night,
Or
or
falling, or
I
goldfish, or whatever.
so designing the right questions is a really important place to start. Yeah. I'm going to read through some of these others. Getting participants, that's also a really hard one. Yep. Impact often only arises in the long term. Yep. That is a really important point. It's difficult to prove impact as it relates, kind of the causality and the relationship. That's a really important one. Leading questions, yep. The challenges and
Really vague
opportunities.
questions, like your example of really vague questions, is just as bad as a leading question, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it can lead to you getting no information at all. And ultimately, those things can waste people's time, right? Like these surveys, you're asking people typically to step away from their regular day-to-day activities and spend time with you. And if you have not done the work on the front end to design good questions, then you're not serving them well.
Is it tempting to try and get too much out of like a massive survey? Is it maybe better to do regular keeping in touch conversations with people and
Yeah,
ask them less?
yeah, and it depends what you're measuring
Mm.
as to the frequency of communication. But I'm a big fan of that, Lucy, because quick feedback loops can really give you good, insightful information that can often translate into little tweaks into adjusting
Bit
how
more
you
dynamic.
operate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can create a much more dynamic environment, which for the nonprofit sector is notoriously difficult. You're working with very complex grant structures and multiple stakeholder initiatives. You're working cross-culturally, often in very low tech, low capacity environments, and it can be really difficult to pivot. But um, having meaningful data that can back up your decision to make changes can really help. Yeah.
And like Paul, if the challenges and the opportunities always seems to relate to the people involved in any process, you're not wrong, Paul. There's a
Yeah.
lot of variance in this, isn't there? From the audience to your team.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of different individuals speak into these things and have to be involved in from all the way from the design to the report sharing. Yeah, it can be hard to synthesize and analyze. These are great points.
I feel like
The
this
people
is kind of
involved in
like
the
an open
process,
forum. People are sharing their own challenges here, aren't they? They've all gone through this. This
yeah,
is what I'm hearing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, these are lived experiences. Um, yeah, resource and time intensive difficulties of presenting qualitative data in particular. Yep,
Mm.
very, very difficult.
Stakeholder
So,
consultation fatigue. Yeah, you don't want to ask them too much, too many times. There's this blend,
mm,
isn't there? And I think how is this a process you apply differently with each project, Robert? You know, looking at your group and the data you want to capture. This isn't a one size fits all. I think that's what's coming through.
yes, yeah, yeah. And this can be a like these 6 steps here could be a multi-year process of designing, implementing, collecting kind of that longitudinal data across a period of time where you can speak to these individuals where you would hire and train the enumerators and send them out to collect the data multiple times before you would synthesize and analyze. So absolutely. This could
And
also just be a quick 1 day touch point, what I call a pulse check,
and
just
this
to check in
willingness
on.
to respond and the responses, because people, I feel there's this cynicism, isn't there, about you see someone with a clipboard in the street, you naturally just go across the other side of the street. So you know, people can be very wary of how data is going to be used and how you're going to use the information they give you.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if those on the call have heard of a book called The Goldilocks Challenge. But if you have not, I'll at some point during the call, maybe we can drop a link for it in the chat.
I'll go
But
and find it.
yeah, it's a great book that uses the framework called CART, and it's CARTE. And as we're just talking about that willingness to respond and anonymous or not, and what those who you're surveying might think you're going to be doing with the data. The last principle in CART, the E, is equity in the data and ensuring that you're not just collecting data and then keeping it in your head office, but that you're actually sharing it back to those who shared the information with you and saying, thank you for sharing. And here's what we heard from you and from others in your community who took this survey. And it can be a really dignifying process to give voice and invite further feedback and further clarification. We've used this in a number of different surveys to actually strengthen our insights and findings to be able to say, here's what we heard, and can you give us a little bit more? And so it is a really important step to provide that equity in the data.
And I apologise for the link I've just posted, it being on Amazon. I did try and find it on Waterstones, but it didn't. I got a lot of different Goldilocks books on that on Waterstones, so I'm sure it's available for more independent bookshops. But that's the book you're talking about, just so that everyone
Yes.
knows. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah. Yeah. It is that's been a very formative book for me. And I would highly recommend. I'm going to focus here a little bit as we move forward on the time and budget piece. And again, with this session being a lens towards AI, and towards the implementation of technology in collecting, analyzing, and sharing data. I from being parts of many, many surveys, and I'm guessing from the comments that at least a good handful of you are have actively been involved in this process as well. From my experience, and from some of the research that we've done, the first 2 steps take 10 to 20% of the time. If you've designed your program well and you have the structure outlined well, then you can design your survey faster. So there's some assumptions built into this. But generally speaking, 10 to 20% of your time, 10 to 15% of your budget. Then those middle two, the hire and train enumerators and send out enumerators to collect the data. That is oftentimes the heaviest lift within this entire process. It takes time. Oftentimes, if you're working across borders, this can be complicated further by time zones and other challenges as well. But there's a lot of dynamics built into how you train someone to collect data in a responsible way. The questions that you ask are often really hashed over. You might end up training Lucy and I both on how to collect data, but we think of a question from slightly different perspectives, and so we'll ask it differently when we're in the communities, and we'll try and clarify the question for the recipient, and that means we get different data back. And so you run the risk of kind of this misinterpretation of the questions from the enumerators and the responses, and maybe when a participant or a respondent says, here's what I think. And Lucy's like, well, I think this is more of what they mean. So I'm going to record this response. And so you have all these variances in your data, and you really, again, you're trying to collect high quality data so that you can serve these individuals, their families, their communities effectively. But you can oftentimes find yourself working with very limited confidence in the data that you have. And so we end up spending a lot of time and money on this part of impact measurement that is oftentimes one of the biggest risk factors as well. And so then the final part, we've for some time had, even if they're more what I would call like basic tools like Excel, they're still very powerful in terms of analysis that you can perform. And if you have someone who has those skill sets, those analysis have been sped up tremendously by AI, but the ability to do them has not necessarily improved drastically in terms of the ways that we measure and synthesize and analyze. But the speed at which you can do them has. And so as we're looking at this middle section, this is where April and I, as we were thinking and conceiving about where we believe we can help drive change within this space and collect higher quality data at a lower price, that's where we started focusing our time and attention. And the question was, how can technology truly impact this space for the better? And how can we use it to drive positive and meaningful change for those who are seeking to do positive social change through their work, and not just use it for the private tech companies and the public tech companies who want to harvest data for further profits. And so this is where that synthesis really met, was in that middle portion. And so through the SIMBA surveys that you can conduct through WhatsApp, it allows organizations who are implementing this to reduce time and budget. And so that's the power of technology in terms of implementing things that, yes, SIMBA is not a fully AI. We are not an AI company, but we do implement and integrate AI into our work. And so this transformation has allowed organizations to be able to collect more data, oftentimes at a higher quality and at a lower cost and in less time. And so as a company, this has been really the rewarding aspect of our work, is to be able to serve institutions like universities, like nonprofits, local governments even, to be able to really collect meaningful data to help inform better program design in the future. And so I want to lay that foundation of how technology can improve our impact measurement and our data collection processes. But before we go deeper into the AI side, I would love to ground us in, importantly, what are we talking about when we break down outputs, outcomes, and impacts? I get the sense from at least those who are active in the chat that we might be familiar with this. And so just as a gauge here, who on the call is familiar with the theory of change, and what do you know about it? If you could just drop in the chat, that will give me a little bit of a sense of how much time to spend on this section based off of the feedback from the group that we have on the call. All right. Very familiar, not aware, heard of it. Nope. All right.
You've got every variant there, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
which is good.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I'm aware of, but if you said to me, Lucy, tell me what it is, I don't want to. I'm like, it's a concept I'm aware of, but I'd really like to understand the structure of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with
yeah.
that. And see, Alexandra, thank you, made me feel better there. I'm kind of like, yeah, I've heard of it, but if you said, like, can we deliver that? I'd be like, not really, no.
Yeah,
So yeah,
great. Well, let's spend some time on this then. For those of you who are familiar and who use theory of change regularly, would love for your input on this. So please would encourage you to give some examples of how you used theory of change in your work, of specific feedback on what I'm about to share around the theory of change because I think this is important groundwork as we are talking about impact measurement. Without a strong uh, concept of an understanding of theory of change, it can be really hard to know what to measure and how to communicate it effectively. So, at its most basic definition, a theory of change is a comprehensive description and illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. And so, breaking that down a little bit, I'm just going to use the three words, the theory of change. This is your idea. This is your concept. And by yours, I'm not speaking to you as an individual. I'm speaking at a institutional level or on your team. How do you or your organization believe that change takes place? And so we're going to test that theory over time as we implement. And with any good theory, we will be able to refine it to improve, or we will show that this theory is false. This doesn't work. And both are appropriate outcomes, right? So this is an iterative process. A theory of change should never just be assumed to be true for all times and for all contexts. This is a working tool. And so I would encourage you as we're thinking about impact measurement, impact should not be binary of yes, we have achieved our goal and we are satisfied and we are done. Or no, we have missed the mark and nothing about this was good or successful. Oftentimes it's on a spectrum. We are looking at degrees of change over time. And so we can use it to improve the programming that we have. And this is going back to what we were talking about earlier, being agile in our work through the data that we're collecting can allow us to improve our theory of change more rapidly. Um, I'm going to read some comments here in the chat. And I see Ninella has used it to map stakeholders and impact narrative while preparing for grant applications. That's a great use case for the theory of change. Understanding who the various stakeholders are in your intervention, in your programming is so important. And this is a really great communication tool to those to grant funders and those who might be interested in funding the work that you are doing. And then Zainab says we used it to plan how to prevent harmful consequences of porn use in adolescence. Great example. So looking at your logical theory around how these interventions that you're working on, how the stakeholders who are involved will contribute towards the change that you are hoping to see. So the basic elements of a theory of change start with the problem, right? And define clearly what are we trying to solve for here. And although This shows a linear progression from problem, activities, outputs, outcomes to impact. Oftentimes, you start with the problem and defining, okay, what is it that we're looking to solve? So, for example, my background in economic development, we want to end poverty, right? So, we want to see individuals be able to provide for themselves, for their families, and live in thriving community. Um, but to get there, we start with that problem of poverty, and then we actually describe our impact next. So we kind of jump to the end, and we describe that we want individuals to be able to provide for their families, to provide for their communities, and live in a thriving environment. And then we go back to building our activities, outputs, and outcomes. And so this process allows us to think very logically about something that can oftentimes, particularly in the nonprofit space, be very emotive. You just are passionate. You just feel very strongly about something, and you know that there's something that's not right that needs to be right. And the theory of change can help you articulate that in a really clear way. So this is a structure that we use as we're thinking about impact and data measurement. Lucy, I saw you come off mute. Did
Well,
you
I was
have
gonna say,
something?
do you put a number on the impact? Because you say like poverty, that's huge. And are you saying, is it better to start this with poverty in this city is a problem? Our impact will be that we help X number of people, or did you start at that concept and then do you break it down into activities, outputs, and outcomes as to how many people you can support
Yes.
through your? Okay, cool. Because
Great
it feels
question.
huge, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
just get Elon Musk to sort it; it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it feels fast, and you want to have an impact. You want to move this conversation forward.
Yes. Yeah. I'll jump to this slide because I think it relates exactly to what you're asking. And so within these different phases of kind of outputs, outcomes, and impacts, you start iteratively, and oftentimes you would design this for. I think someone actually just put it here in the chat. Kathy says, "Can you have a broader TOC as well as phases like the initial implementation phase?" Absolutely. And so oftentimes what we have in our programming is a very broad theory of change that speaks to more of our institutional theory of change. What do we believe about poverty and how we can contribute to the reduction of poverty? And then we also have our kind of more specific program designs with our specific interventions would each have a theory of change of the specific activities, the specific outputs, and what that looks like to lead towards transformation just within one program under the umbrella of the organization. So this is definitely a tool that you can use at various scales and scopes. I would petition that as you're looking at impact measurement and as you're seeking to effectively assess the impact of a program, that you do it more granular rather than larger umbrella, because as we'll talk about, or I'll just mention it now, as you go further out, your level of influence reduces. So you have your you have your activities, which as an organization, institution, as an individual, you are very much in control of. You get to decide how your resources are allocated, what you decide to invest your time and energy into. And then those are directly translated into outputs, and we'll dig into the outputs piece of this here in a minute. But those are basically very deductive assessments of whether an activity took place. So, did someone start the webinar? Yes or no? Did people join the webinar? Yes or no? How many people joined the webinar? Yes or no? Those are outputs, right? Outcomes then are your next layer. And so those start to talk about the changes that take place within the individual or the community that you're working with. And those outcomes can be short term, midterm, long term. And then ultimately, you're speaking about impact, which is like a societal large scale change. That's your vision casting. And your outcomes, you have less control over. I'll give an example. We were working in Haiti, implementing grassroots financial services in the form of savings groups, for those of you who might be familiar with savings groups. And we had a control and a treatment community where we were asking questions around their income and resilience, and their ability to provide for their daily needs, and for their ability to withstand shocks and emergencies. And after 2 to 3 years of implementing the program with savings groups, the the desire to see transformation, and all of the time and energy that we put into it, 2 or 3 years afterwards, the community was worse off than when we started. Um, and this was really discouraging. I mean, we had put a lot of time and energy into this. But thankfully, in terms of data collection and impact measurement, we had the control community to see that actually the control community was even worse off than those who had received the intervention. And so, what we could demonstrate through our impact measurement was that yes, we had seen this community deteriorate over time because of external factors, but they were still more resilient than the communities that were not receiving this intervention. And so I share that example of less control because there, as you get further away from your activities and outputs, your outcomes and impacts are not just your doing. They rely on an entire ecosystem of other stakeholders and other factors that you may or may not be in control of at all. So, climate shocks, political and economic turmoil and challenges, and crises, even just individual household crises. You might be working with a family that experiences a major health crisis or other factors that might drastically change their reality. And if that is the individual that you're serving and surveying, you might find that your intervention didn't work, but it was because of something beyond your control. And so the theory of change, I would say, as you get more specific and as you seek to see shorter term outcomes and midterm outcomes, that's probably your sweet spot. When you start measuring long-term outcomes and impact, we talk about having control over our activities and outputs, influence over outcomes, and interest in the impact that you're seeking to contribute towards. But by no means are we the only factor in ending poverty around the world, right? So that is an important piece of this. So, yeah, what questions do we have here? What thoughts come to mind as we're reviewing the theory of change?
I like Burnet's comment about it's very helpful to structure thinking and planning, ensure ego or own intentions don't take over.
Absolutely.
This is a good group project, isn't it? You've got your team together.
Yes, yeah. And oftentimes we actually have also collectively done this process with the communities that we're seeking to serve. And so you can actually walk them through your proposed theory of change and say, hey,
Then
here's
you both
what,
own it, so you're not inflicting it on
yeah.
them and going, hello, poor people, we're going to come and help you, which is, again, you can sometimes feel that energy, can't you, in some projects of, we're going to tell the community what they need. As you say, if you take them in a co-curation, they can tell you what's going to work, what's not going to work, how they're going to engage, what activities they would engage with, and what they're just not going to avoid,
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about it as a co-design process. So
Yeah.
we work to co-design various implementations of our work, and we look through these various aspects and say, hey, how does this sound? And of course, we're somewhat limited organizationally of what we can say yes to or no to, based off of our resources and our capacity. But even within the spectrum that we can make adjustments and the community can speak into that, does go a very long way towards creating consensus and ownership.
Just like we were saying earlier about the language and the positioning
Yes.
of the survey, if we're speaking to the community, we can speak in their language.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And having local staff that can understand the context to help build your theory of change and help refine it can go a long way as well. So, yeah. What other questions do we have?
Everyone's thinking. It's gone quiet in chat.
As you're thinking, I'll just show some examples. These are literally ones I just pulled off of Google. But I wanted to demonstrate here that theory of change is not a one size fits all. You can adapt your theory of change based off of what you are designing and who you're designing for. And so sometimes they're very artful and very creative. Other times they're more logical and more kind of deductive outcomes, very clear language. So it kind of depends on what you're using your theory of change for. If you're using it as a communication tool towards grant makers or donors, maybe you want to get a little bit more creative to help inspire support for your work. If you're using it within programs and operations, maybe the clear, simple language of here's exactly what the outputs, outcomes, impacts are that we want to measure, and here are the clear activities that we want to implement can be more helpful. So depending on your audience, depending on the tools, you can design this in different ways.
Got a couple of comments. I was going to say, yeah, Valentina and Ninella. I'll leave you, Robert, to read those ones out.
Yeah, I will read them as out loud for the audience here in case you're not able to access the chat. In terms of impact, I think it's important to consider both short-term and long-term outcomes. This means not only evaluating whether an intervention works in the immediate future, but also thinking about its scalability and sustainability. That's a great point. Whether it can be implemented more widely and continue to have an effect over time. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great comment, Valentina. Thank you for sharing that. And Ninella, knowing the desirable outcomes and impacts, what measures do you set in place throughout the process? Yes, great point. I will speak to that here on the next slide. This is, and I'll come back, Burnett, to your question after I speak to Ninella's point here. But fundamentally, as we're looking at the theory of change, you really want to be measuring various data points at every level. And so as you're measuring your activities or your outputs, I talk about this as your dashboard on your car. These are kind of your KPIs. These are your signs that things are operating as they should be. That if we say our program, our intervention includes these specific activities. Activity A is meeting with community members. Activity B is doing financial literacy training or health training or educating young children or getting more children involved in sports or drama or whatever your programming might include. Those activities need to be taking place in order for you to measure anything about the outcomes or impact in the long term. If you see a breakdown in that these activities aren't even happening, then there's no point in going on and measuring your outcomes because you know for sure that you haven't contributed to them. So you might see a change over time, but it definitely wouldn't be you if your activities aren't even taking place. So you need those operational metrics that are going to be able to measure your activities and your outputs of those activities. So on the flip side of did this activity take place, you can also say, okay, my target for this activity was to have 20 attendees, or for me to make 50 visits, or to distribute 30 kits, or whatever it might be that you're involved in. And then you can also measure on the output side, well, my target was 20, we actually hit 15, or my target was 20, we actually hit 25. And those are your foundational dashboard measurements to say, is this program functioning in a healthy way according to our expectations? That is, as you're thinking about measurements throughout the process, you need to start with that. You have to start very foundationally. And there's a lot of good tools, tech-based tools that I can share with you about that as well. We use Power BI. There's a number of different tools that can help synthesize kind of this KPI outputs-based data that will help you measure. Um, then from an outcomes perspective, your time horizon changes on these, but you would want to be measuring those short-term outcomes fairly regularly. We at Hope International, we do outcomes measurement typically kind of on an annual basis, seeing, okay, have the savings of each individual increased? Have they had more access to loans over time? Have they increased resilience towards the financial shocks that they might experience? And so you're measuring those, and then over time, 3, 5, 7, 10-year horizons, you can measure those longer term impacts. Were they able to send their kids to school with the income that they were able to save, or were they able to grow and scale their businesses based off of the loans that they had access to? Were they able to meet household needs and provide 3 meals a day? And so you can start to measure these things and their cumulative impact over time. So great question, Nella. And yes, there's a lot of value in measuring those over time.
I like Bennett's comment about theory of change, almost it's seeing that finger pointing at like change, like they need to change. But I think I love Kathy kind of looking at how you could, the language you give it to your community is up to you. It's a framework, isn't it?
So, sorry, say that again, Lucy. It cut out for like,
I would say the language you use to position this with your community is up to you. You haven't got to call it a theory of change. You haven't got to go, you can't, as you say, this finger pointing.
yep,
So,
that's right.
that whole insinuation of like what you've been doing to this point isn't good. It needs to change. We don't want to alienate our
Yeah.
community before we start working with them. So
Hmm.
I think Alison's right, getting them involved in the crafting of this
Yep.
theory of change, but maybe giving it a different name. I think there's a few angles. How have you approached that, Robert?
Yeah, yeah, good question. That's I think a really important point. And that's where we when we are positioning with the communities, we use the language co-design. Hey, we're here to co-design implementations to help solve some of your community's problems. And so we we don't really use theory of change as more of like an academic term to help with more of the structured design thinking piece of it. But when we're in the communities, we definitely adapt this. I would say that even as I look at my own community, I would say, yeah, there's some things that need changing, and I can identify and use that language. It's kind of like, hey, I can say something about my brother, but if you say it, like I'm coming after you. So yeah, having that posture of listening, and using listening as a tool as kind of the first stage of your intervention can be a really useful way to drive towards impact. And if we miss that listening phase, it can lead towards a limited kind of return on your investment. And ultimately, you miss the opportunity to build and foster that community, and kind of come alongside versus come very paternalistically into a community to drive for transformation. So I think that's a great point. Um, yeah, so this table, I'm not going to go over in detail. I feel like I've shared a lot here already. But we will move forward just in terms of for the sake, how are we doing time-wise? For time-wise here, as we look more towards some of the AI tools and some of the other aspects. So there are a number of different aspects here would be happy to chat through this more if there's more questions. But a quick poll based off of our learnings so far. So this is actually me trying to measure a little bit of an outcome of has my presentation so far been effective. So I've just pulled these about 2 or 3 days ago from a number of different impact reports that I found online from different nonprofits. And these were some of the things that they put on their report. Can you put in the chat whether you think this is an output or an outcome? We got one vote for output, output, outcome, output. Okay. Keep them coming. This is great. Both. Would anybody like to share in the chat a little bit as to why they would vote for output or outcome on this?
I'm going to be brave and say that it's an output. The outcome is that how many lives it saved.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm being brave doing that because it's definitely not my area of expertise.
Thanks for being brave, Lucy. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that this is an output as well. And for exactly the reasons that you just described, Lucy. I do think that yes, there's some assumed outcomes from this, right? But they haven't really told us that. This is simply a delivery mechanism. Like if you're at the end of the year, 2024, and you're sitting in the boardroom and they're saying, "What did you do with our money?" This is probably the conversation that you're having, right? This is the 2.79 billion vaccine doses. That's a staggering number, right? That presents really well, very clearly, very easily. But similar to what we see here in the chat, we need to know the effect of the vaccines. We would need to know the level of protection that it leads to.
The
So,
language is weird here too, 'cause it's been delivered. So for all we know, they could be sitting in a warehouse right now. Do they mean delivered? There's an insinuation that we appreciate that means that people have actually received the vaccines, as in been vaccinated. I'd rather
yes,
have that 2.79 billion people were vaccinated across 69 countries, and
yeah.
therefore the death rate of whatever the vaccination, will be reduced by. Yeah, because at the
Mhm.
moment there just could be some, vaccines sitting in a cupboard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
They've
don't
missed a
know,
trick here,
and
haven't they?
and this is a one snapshot. If you read the full report, maybe there's some more information, but this is typically how impact is reported right now, and this is all of these that I'm showing you right now are from impact reports. So let's go to the next one. Um, let's see about this one. So this is specifically relating to savings groups. And this is from an impact report that says group members are 2 times more likely to be prepared to withstand financial emergencies than the comparison group. This one might be.
Fran is straight in there. Before you'd finish reading it out, Fran's like, outcome.
Yes,
Kathy's
exactly. There
outcome.
we go.
Yeah.
And why? If you can share why.
I really like this. It's very clear. A difference has been made.
A
Yeah.
difference is
Impact
made.
equals outcome. Yeah. The effect that the intervention had. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the output here, I'm just hypothesizing. The output here might have been something along the lines of this organization formed 100 savings groups last year, and each individual was able to save $30. The second part there, the saving $30, might be a short-term outcome. But definitely the formation of the groups is just an output, right? We don't know if those groups are meeting regularly, if they're saving, if they're actually using those funds or finances for worthwhile investments. But this, as an outcome, really starts to show us whether or not the intervention was effective. All right, great job. Here's another one. Output or outcome? 1 million people trained in climate smart agriculture and sustainable land management. See an output.
I'm agreeing
All
output.
right.
We don't know what that training is delivered. We can make some assumptions.
Yeah, we can make some assumptions. That's best case scenario, right? We can assume that the trainers were actually knew what they were talking about, that the farmers were able to absorb and apply what they learned, that they had the resources. Um, but at this level, we're just able to see that they spent their time and resources on actually conducting agriculture trainings. So this one to me is pretty squarely in the output category. If you put outcome, I would be curious to hear your rationale. This is definitely an opportunity for us to debate and discuss because there are different perspectives on this, so would be eager to hear your thoughts. But based off of kind of the framework that we've been looking at, I would put this in the output category. All right, and last one, output or outcome? A 9 times increase in savings amongst participants after the program ends, plus a 37% increase in earnings. 93% of participants sustain the benefits 10 years after the graduation. An outcome. Yeah.
There's a really long tail on it as well, that 10 years plus.
Yeah. I mean, that's a staggering, that's like long-term outcomes verging on like impact. These are
Yeah.
really good indicators that you could publish to really demonstrate that this was something that people actually really liked. You don't stick with something for 10 years unless it was actually helping you out. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. This has given me more confidence in general that we're on the right track here in terms of this session and communicating what we'd hoped to. So the last step here is now I would love for you to practice. And we're going to use a very simple structure for a theory of change. And it's the if, and, then framework. So I'm going to give you an example, a very, very simple example, and I would love for you all to apply this to your own lives. And then we'll just share some in the chat and we'll wrap up this portion on theory of change and impact measurement. So here's mine. If I study French for a year and I practice speaking French with a friend at least twice a week, then I will be conversationally fluent in a year or in 1 year. So this is my theory of change. If I actually take the time to study French and I practice speaking it, my outcome, my objective here will be that I am conversationally fluent. So, what is your outcome? What are well, I've kind of given this away here. Let's create our own. So just take a minute. You can think of anything in your day-to-day life. Maybe think of your New Year's resolutions that you had at the beginning of this year that you might have dropped off by at this point midway.
But that's a good
And
example because we make them too big.
Yeah.
We do the same with our projects. We make them too big, then they become too daunting, then you don't get there. Whereas what I like about this is like I'm breaking it down. It's twice a week. It's a year, it's twice a week.
Some specific measurables that you can come back to and say, did I do this? Did I do that?
Yeah,
Yes and yes.
you
Okay.
haven't just said by December I'm going to be fluent in French. You've worked out how you're going to get there. And that's I think
Yes.
what we do is like, yeah, we're going to help everybody not be in debt. No, we're going to break it down.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the
I think
hope
it's a
here.
very human trait, isn't it?
And it allows me to look back at my activities at the end of the year, if I'm not conversationally fluent, I can look back and say, did I do the lessons? And
I
did
skipped
I?
that lesson. I went on holiday. I didn't do this.
Yeah. So if I'm not conversationally fluent, was it a surprise because I didn't actually complete my activities? And was I practicing with a friend twice a week?
Yep.
Well, not really, sometimes, but not often.
Yeah, we started
Um,
talking French, then we started talking about the football, and then we kind of went over there.
exactly. Yeah. So
Alexis
I
has got
could
to
look
rate in
back
there.
at my activities and measure
Mhm.
if it was effective.
Yeah.
Um, and then I could also look at my outcomes.
Alexis, if I learn to navigate screens in my daily life and improve time management skills, I will improve my sleep quality.
I love that.
I hope. I
Yeah.
like that. I hope at the end.
That's all we can say is I hope at the end of all of these, right? At the end of any theory of change, you caveat with say, we really hope that this is true. I
Should we be more
appreciate that.
specific? Improve time management skills. I feel that's quite broad as my and. Should it be? I think there should be something more like you've got the twice a week. We need something a
Hmm.
bit more because we can't go back and say improve is a very fluffy word. So how do we make this a better structure as a
Yeah.
sentence?
Yeah, that's where, yeah, having specific measurables can help you as you're on your journey towards im impact measurement because it does allow you, and especially with words that are common in the impact space, transformation, or yeah, we improved life skills or things like that. They are very, there's a spectrum of interpretation. So yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Introduce pauses of 15 minutes twice a day during work
And you've
hours.
got
Love that.
data. So if you're on your phone or your laptop, you have data on this. Again, back to your point earlier at the beginning, you
Hmm.
can put tools on your phone or on your desktop, your laptop, which show what you're doing. And
Yes.
so you can go actually, so you can set a benchmark of today of I'm
Hmm.
spending 27 hours a week on whatever. And you go, right, I'm going to reduce it, I'm going to switch it off. Then you've got the data to prove it. So if you're not quite sure if you did, you can see.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Using those data points can be so powerful. I love these other examples coming in. If I spend 30 minutes daily on LinkedIn learning a project management course for 6 months, and I use the knowledge in my current role as a research assistant, then I will be a great project manager. Love that. Yeah.
Nice and
Um,
specific. Yeah.
yeah, some good measurables in there. Um, and very testable, right? You can invite others to say, how would you rate me as a project manager at the end of 6 months? And you can see, okay, I did the course, I did it for the amount of time. I believe I've leveraged my knowledge in my current role. And now my colleagues are saying that I'm a good project manager. I'm a
I'd
great.
like a measure of what a great project manager is. I think you're right. I want that. What does that mean?
Yep. Yeah. You can definitely break these down into oftentimes when you're measuring impact, you would assign indicators to your statement. So if you're saying project manager, your question wouldn't be, is this person a great project manager? It's more, the questions would be, is this individual able to effectively assess the time frame for a project's anticipated length? Is this person effectively able to scope a project? Is this person effectively able? And then you would say these are the contributing indicators to a great project manager. I'm just going to read these other two here and then we'll move on. But if I invest 500 euros every month for 30 years and do it in an investment, I am likely to be financially independent. Yep, that's a great one and a very long-term outcome here or impact in terms of that financial independence. You have to wait a long time to test that theory. But again, we all put hope in that, right? Most of us have exactly what you just described, and we're believing in this theory of change that at some point, if we invest long enough, we'll be financially independent. If I prune plants regularly and feed them with the right nutrients, then I will maintain a tidy garden and encourage continuous growth. Love that. Yeah. These are great examples. And I think these help just demonstrate on a very, very simple personal level that we're all actively engaged with the theory of change in our personal lives, and taking this to an institutional level and thinking of it in terms of how we can describe the change. And also, my hope is that you all could take these that you've put in the chat and your organizational or your team theories of changes and give them to others and say, hey, hold me accountable to this. I'm going to be reporting back to you, because that is really how we ultimately improve, is to come back and say, I was pretty lazy with my French lessons. I didn't do it. And that person that is holding you accountable, hopefully they say, well, let's do better. How can we sharpen this? What do we need to do to help
Why did
improve?
it go wrong? Well,
Yeah,
actually, twice a week was hard, and my friend kept going on holiday.
yeah.
Where was the backup plan for well, not the friend not being around? Should we be using
Mhm.
Duolingo if the friend can't make a coffee? Yeah, so where did it go? It's good to unpack the best intentions.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what good accountability does, is really break it down for you and help you sharpen and improve. And as we're thinking about this, we have to have the measurements in place. So um, I want to focus a little bit again on the specific process of collecting data. And so here are a few ways that I have seen artificial intelligence integrated into these processes that we've been talking about. So you've designed your theory of change, you've started your implementation, and you're now wanting to begin your data collection to be able to measure your change over time. And so you're trying to test that theory through your data. And so as we are looking at various ways that AI can integrate, if you have a good theory of change, you can actually just drop that theory of change into AI and say, hey, what are some questions or indicators that might help me measure this? That can be a good starting point. I would say it's probably just a starting point. I wouldn't rely only on what AI would give you in terms of questions to measure your theory of change. But it has definitely helped me be it has helped me brainstorm new questions and new angles to be able to understand impact and be able to ask effective questions. The other thing it can do is if you have a question, you can say, I want to ask this question in a culturally appropriate way to this demographic or in this specific context. And how might I ask it in a more appropriate way? And it can help you sharpen your questions and help you improve the way that you ask. So that's a really nice and easy entry point, being able to use that. It can also help with translation. So we at Simba have a tool that integrates that can allow you to uh, translate. Again, you would want these validated, but you can use the tool to translate both questions and responses into about 150 languages. And so that's a really powerful tool that we did not have even 3 or 4 years ago. This has been transformational in the pace of which something can be translated and communicated in different languages. And so this just reduces a lot of time and friction. And gives you a good first draft. Again, you would definitely want to validate this with a native speaker, and someone who can ensure that the interpretation and the context of the question is correct. So it can also increase those that you're able to survey and able to invite into the data process. So again, looking at CART and that equity piece of the data, leaving out voices is a huge risk to your program's ultimate effectiveness. And if you haven't been able to listen to the right people because of language barriers, that can be a huge challenge. And so AI can really help you reach more people through its capabilities with language. Then analysis, again, I think a lot of this, we point towards this as a really big piece of the pie, but ultimately, what I think AI has done is help speed up this process. Um, but sentiment analysis, so was someone positive or neutral or negative in their comments? Um, AI can really help you assess sentiment. It can also help you draw out themes. So you can say someone positively spoke about the environment or someone negatively spoke about the environment. So your sentiment is the positive or negative, your theme is the environment. And then you can also be able to then break that up by your segments, by your demographics, by your contexts, by whatever various variables that you have included in your demographic data. So it could be income level, it could be age. So you could ultimately have AI, as you put in your parameters for analysis, say, I would like to know for all of the women over 60 what their sentiment is on the environment. And then you could have AI break that down for you. And so those have been effective tools to be able to draw out data really quickly. And again, this rapid feedback loop, as long as you have trust in the quality of your data, can help you really transform this into actionable steps for your theory of change. So say, hey, we've noticed that women over 60 are by far the most pessimistic about the effects of vaccines on young children. We need to work specifically with them to educate them on the benefits of vaccines. Just an example of a way that you could quickly adapt and quickly build your programming around the data that you're getting from your surveys. There's other exciting ways that I would say are emerging in terms of analysis. So picture analysis, there's a project that is being worked on where we are able to ask an individual through a Simba survey to take a picture of their house. And through taking a picture of their house, you can use that to measure aspects of what's called the multidimensional poverty index, which is an indicator of the intensity of poverty experienced by an individual or a family in their context. So um, this picture of their house, it can analyze the roofing material, the flooring material, whether they've got water running into the house or not, whether it has electricity running into the house or not. And all of these are factors that help measure MDPI. And instead of asking that individual, do you have water? Do you have electricity? Do you have a tin roof or a thatch roof? Or do you have mud flooring, or do you have tile flooring? Instead of asking all of those questions, just say, please send me a picture of your house, and you can gain all those measurements. So there's a lot of emerging technologies in that as well, which is an exciting space to be able to measure impact from various perspectives. Um, Geolocation, audio analysis, these tools, I think, can really help with just speeding up the pace of your analysis as well. And also, importantly, we haven't talked about it a lot at all, but there is, especially when there's pressure to demonstrate positive impact. So, say your funding is coming, particularly this dynamic exists when your funding is coming from um, a big foundation or a grant maker. And if you don't demonstrate positive impact, that funding is cut. That's already an unhealthy balance. And so your drive to demonstrate positive impact can actually lead towards fraudulent data. And so AI can help actually uncover fraud in data collection. And so by looking at patterns, by looking at speed of responses, by looking at geolocation. If I was supposed to be at a meeting in a rural community, but my data is showing that I collected this from the hub in a major city while I was sitting on my couch, just putting in, well, yeah, this meeting had 25 people as we had budgeted for, but I'm not actually in the community. AI can really help raise flags around data quality and data fraud. And so I think this is an emerging space, but a very exciting space to be able to have higher levels of confidence in our data. Um, and then reporting, data visualization, report writing, and summarization. These are all ways that AI has been and is being integrated into impact measurement. All right, I'll pause here just as I know we only have about 6 or 7 minutes left. I have a couple of case studies, but would rather answer questions for those who
Got a
have them.
question from Sophia about, do you or your survey participants have any concerns related to data security when you're collecting these images, audio via WhatsApp?
Yeah, great question, Sophia. Yes, that is an important piece. All of what we do through Simba is GDPR compliant, and then countries have their own specific requirements as well. These oftentimes have consent based questions to, you know, ask for their permission before collecting any data. And um, questions always have an opt-out. Participants never have to answer a question. It's never contingent on a service being provided. And so we do want to make sure that we genuinely respect the data and the privacy of those who are sharing it with us. And ultimately, that is shared back.
Got a really good question from Alexis around bias. Since the sample of participants in your impact assessment is often not representative of the whole population that was involved in the intervention.
Yeah, good question. So I think there's two ways you can do this. One, by using good methodology that is appropriate for the intervention. So randomizing, having control groups, having appropriate sequencing of data collection. So oftentimes not just starting data collection when you start the intervention, but actually starting data collection maybe 3 to 6 months before that, to be able to get an appropriate baseline for both your control and treatment. And so you can address bias somewhat. The other piece of that is just acknowledging bias, just saying, listen, we are operating within limited resource, quasi-experimental. None of this is going to be the rigorous scientific method. And sometimes, even if we could, that's not the most ethical approach when you're dealing with people and humans. So, acknowledging the bias and just accepting that that is part of the equation. Yeah, great question though, and something to keep wrestling with. All right. I will just share very, very briefly here. These are some of the feedbacks from Simba, and I've kept some of this anonymous just to protect the customers that we're working with. But this is some of the outputs from the surveys that we have, and how you can see here some of those. And this has all been analyzed using AI, but not just with AI. It has been supplemented after the initial run through by people. And so, but you can see here how sentiment, how themes have been used to help measure impact or change in the programming. So this is looking at childhood trauma and experiences of individuals who have experienced trauma, and some of the transformation that they experienced through the programming of one of our Simba customers. And so they were able to measure this through these various indicators and move beyond the output of, we had this number of people attend the classes around addressing trauma and move more into the outcomes and impacts of their intervention to be able to say these were the types of transformation that individuals experienced. So I will end there. I'm going to just leave this slide up with a caution for AI. As much as it can synthesize and analyze, don't forget to read them yourselves. Oftentimes, there's little gems that AI can miss that are going to really be helpful. And don't let AI design it for you. Use your intellect, use your intuition to be able to help inform your design. And ultimately, allow AI to create time and space for relationship building, not replace it. So as you're wanting to design impactful programs, interventions, make sure that AI is actually allowing you to do that better and not removing you further steps away from the communities that you're trying to serve. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Robert. That was great. And I think that's been a real theme over all the series. AI is a great tool. It doesn't replace your brain, your intellect, your relationships, but it will help. It might help you focus more on that. I think that's a really good place to be.
Yeah.
Cool. We will